The best part about seeing a first trailer to a new game is imagining how all these unconnected scenes will play out in one cohesive picture, and let us retrospect how naive most of our ideas were. The other part is about all the expectations that come naturally along, and with the first proper 3D platformer in the series, it's only self-explanatory to anticipate something never seen before. Putting Kirby in such an uncharacteristic setting is the first step in creating curiosity, and while we haven't seen many aspects of the gameplay so far, there surely is more to come. As I stated many times by now, my 20 years long waiting for my dream Kirby game has finally proved to be real, and in spring next year this moment will come true. Until then, Nintendo is certainly going to spoil 90% of the game, so as long as that point hasn't become reality, I would like to present my hopes and fears for Kirby and the Forgotten Land. Let's start with the positive side and discuss what I wish the game will be doing. First, the game world. The more I watch the trailer, and believe me, I've seen it many times by now, the more I realize how linear the level design is probably going to be. Initially, this comes off as a disappointment since games like Super Mario Odyssey strive for this grand scope of spectacle, but I was never expecting something akin to Odyssey when talking about Kirby's first 3D venture. It always seemed plausible to start with something more safe, something focused and similar to 3D World or Crash Bandicoot to test the waters, and in that regard my expectations are honestly already surpassed. Although the level design appears to lean towards linearity and probably only minor optional branches, the different worlds are put in an immersive context and don't consist of magical platforms floating in the air. Everything is tangible and makes sense so that we can walk through a traditional course while getting the impression of an open world. And this is probably the best approach they could have done. I only hope to find some things to discover since the game is literally called after this fact in Japanese. So while the levels are understandably linear in design, I wish for some kind of hub world or plausible connections between each place. Choosing each level from a traditional world map would not fit the feeling of the game and tone down the immersion I just described. The bridges between the islands are a good indication for what I expect, and since Star Allies also loosened the conventions of the genre, I don't think they will fall back on a rather ordinary depiction of progress. In the worst case, it should only be something like an Odyssey, where the game in general was portrayed by a world map, but felt intentionally so bare bones that it doesn't really give the impression of one. Likewise, the level design should reflect the same dynamic and feature some orchestrated scenes in order to keep the gameplay flow exciting. I'm not saying that Kirby games should have more cutscenes or something familiar, far from it, but Star Allies again is the perfect example of what I mean. Instead of only having one boss at the end of a world or focusing on a specific worn-out theme like grass, desert or lava, each world was regarded as a chapter and was composed of multiple level themes and sometimes even turned out to be a great contrast within said world. The same goes for boss battles, which weren't bound to appear at the final level and could appear at any time in any level. Of course, each world or island will probably have some kind of theme, but the Forgotten Land should strive for this flexibility in order to provide varying level and keep the feeling fresh. Assuming that most of the scenes in the trailer are pulled from the same world, we already got a glimpse of what that could look like in the form of the spooky looking level that depicts a great contrast to everything else. The same goes for the gorilla boss, which is set up before the fight and has even a little action sequence before the fight even starts. So in that regard, the game appears to already deliver on that point and hopefully doesn't bound itself to some sort of genre rules. Speaking of boss fights, the last 4 Kirby games, mainly the Return to Dreamland saga, made a great effort in enhancing what boss fights could actually be. Return to Dreamland added multiple phases and attacks, Triple Deluxe put the background in the middle of the action, Planet Robobot played with complex camera shifts, and Star Allies mixed up boss fights by letting them appear whenever it seemed right. One of the main reasons why Kirby boss fights are so outstanding in the genre is their way of ditching conventions, for example the classic 3-hit pattern, and rather stage each fight as an actual battle between characters. It doesn't feel like a programmer designed the boss's behavior. Although Kirby can still learn a lot of things to improve boss fights, they already reached an exceptional point where people excitedly anticipate the multi-phase final encounters. Kirby's Blowout Blast was a great first taste of what classic enemies like Krakow could look in 3D, and while there's no certainty Hell will have the same grasp of immersive fights in 3D, I think they will most likely going to deliver. Currently, the game with the best boss fights in the 3D platform is, in my opinion, ahead in time. No similar game comes even close to what is presented here, but the Forgotten Land is the first game where I truly think and hope it could rival ahead in time, at least to some extent. It goes without saying that the final should be equally ludicrous as past games and consist of multiple phases with a new demon god. This leads to another wish of mine: keep the story and antagonist in check this time. I know that people already expect some sort of hellish beast from another dimension, but I think it's time for a little break. Every now and then, I really appreciate when Kirby games find their way back to more straightforward premises and reflect the simplicity the very first Kirby's Dream Land provided. It's also the reason why I love the story of Kirby Fighters 2. It was just Meta Knight and DDD teaming up to fuel the old rivalry that is often forgotten amidst all the demonic gods. The new enemy design is already assigned for something more down to earth, since they seemingly left behind the floating arm style and concentrated on simple animals. Going by the Japanese Twitter account, the antagonists call themselves the Beast Army, so it appears to be nothing similar to a dark cult or intergalactic company. Copy abilities are another topic that doesn't get as much attention as they should. Even though the trailer didn't show any new ones, Needle for example gave a convincing first look on how classic power-ups can be upgraded in 3D. And it's not only that, Super Mario Odyssey's gimmick, taking over enemies, is a very similar concept on paper but has one major difference: Mario's controls are restrained. Whenever he captures an enemy, Mario can only walk and behave as the circumstances allow and isn't capable anymore to perform the acrobatic moves he can usually do. In this regard, Kirby is one step ahead and can, except for inhaling, execute all basic moves while getting additional abilities that expand his moveset instead of limiting it for one specific puzzle or battle. And this is the foundation they should build on. Incorporate copy abilities more aggressively into the level design and build puzzles around them. Lighting up a lantern in order to create light or unlocking items is only a small foretaste of what is possible. Make copy abilities more necessary instead of only functioning as a tool of combat, and the level and puzzle design will benefit greatly from the multifunctional abilities Kirby is known for. With hopes come fears, and while I could sit here all day talking about things I would love to see, there are naturally some aspects the game is hopefully going to avoid. Starting with the most general fear, the game needs to be exciting. What I mean by that is not going the safe route and relying on boring set pieces, but instead constantly surprise the player with many unexpected events. Again, I would like to point to Super Mario Odyssey, where you could never know what will happen next. Getting shot down by Bowser only to find yourself in a toxic swamp adds to a thrilling course of sensation and keeps the adventure fresh as well as believable. It's the same thing I was talking about beforehand, where a more flexible gameplay flow provides for a natural feeling, instead of checking off worlds like an arcade-like platformer. Another thing I hope they would fix is the overpowered guard ability in combination with dodge rolls. In modern games it's way too easy to just stay in defense, and while more challenging modes get added as a hard mode, it would be nice to have at least a, normal taxing game, something in the likes of Kirby 64. And if the guard and roll will still be overpowered as usual, make use of the 3D environments and expand Kirby's movement capabilities. One thing I absolutely cannot see in modern Kirby games is the sluggish run that doesn't really differentiate itself noticeably from a normal walk. If the basics are based on Battle Royale, then it seems like there will be no extra run anymore, but the roll dodge for example looks way more dynamic in this game, so if this move is going to be too useful, I hope it will at least be satisfying to perform. These are basically my hopes and fears based on experience from former games or the first trailer. I refrain from being too speculative because at this point we just cannot be sure about certain aspects like multiplayer for example. But if the Forgotten Land just transfers all the greatest strengths of the 2D platformers like boss fights or diverse copy abilities into 3D with some logical adjustments, then there's a good chance we can witness the best Kirby game of all time.